Everybody, it is Marie here from Skeins, and you're with the Quarantine Diaries. Today is day 21. 21 today. There you go, 15th of April. As I said yesterday, it's a bit of a celebration. Landmark, 21 days, 3 weeks that we have been here in lockdown in New Zealand, and I think we've done incredibly well. I've actually busted out a new cup for today, like that one. Before you actually wonder, do I have a theme of profane cups? Yeah, I have more than the two that you've seen so far. Might bust out the other one that I've got as well. Yes, it's an extra big cup of coffee this morning. I'm running a bit behind on caffeine intake today. In fact, I've only been out here for the last few minutes. I was running a bit late. Who caught last night on 3, David Lomas Investigates? Did anyone catch that last night? I didn't catch it last night, but I watched it on demand this morning. And I don't watch all of his stuff, but I have watched the odd Lost and Found that he has done. And this is a new, more in-depth investigative series that he did. And I have to admit, so last night's episode was, I don't remember this. I do remember it being talked about when I was a kid, but there was a baby that was abandoned in a phone box in 1962 in Palmerston North. And this chap has been trying to find his birth parents for a very long time, and the opportunity came up with the show, and also too when he last tried, which was in 2008. Since then, of course, ancestry and DNA and all of that stuff has now become vastly more accessible to members of the public. So he tried again, and I'm not going to say anything more than that because I think you should go and watch it. But let's put it this way: I was sitting there and I was like. The whole time. It was just the most incredible story, and I find that sort of stuff for me personally incredibly powerful, because in our family we actually found my uncle, who is a full uncle, and we found him about it would be 20 years ago now. Actually, possibly even be longer, maybe closer to that. It was after my grandparents both died. This last of my grandparents died. Sort of a few years later, we knew that it was actually, I'm going to tell you a little bit about this. Sorry, Mum. It was actually at the wake of my grandmother's funeral that I'm from a very, very large Irish Maori family. Just putting this into context for people, a very large East Coast family. So if you're either from the coast or you've ever been, we make them big families there, and mine is one of those on both sides. And anyway, when my grandmother passed, one of the many aunts, the M aunts we used to call them, because we had 8 aunts and their first names all began with M, and one of the aunts happened to let slip that her sister-in-law had a baby before my grandparents were actually married, and it was during the war, and it was a forced adoption, as happened at that time. So even though they were engaged, and they actually tried to get permission to get married, and they were denied, and then there were a number of women who were left in that situation. So anyway, my uncle was adopted out. So that bombshell got dropped at my grandmother's wake, because that's what happens when you add, grief plus alcohol and putting families together. So that was quite the bomb. And over a number of years, that percolated around and percolated around and percolated around until eventually my mum said to me that she really would like to see if they could find this brother. So we made inquiries, what was through the Department of Internal Affairs those days. And long story short, back in those days, you wrote letters and they got placed on a file. It was a closed adoption. And so we did all of that. And sorry, my husband's just heading off for a run, letting me know he's taking off. So we did all of that, and we popped it in, and we were told, look, this process, it can take years and years, or it may never happen. So we wrote a letter all about who we were and explaining what we did. I actually wrote the letter. And it just got lodged. It got sent off to the adoption office and sat with his file. Now, unbeknown to us, at that time, exactly at that time, the last of his adopted parents had passed, and his family had said to him he was an only child, and that's when he found out that he was adopted. He was unaware at that point. So he decided that actually it was his wife who said, well, you never know, your birth parents may still be alive. So he made a request for his birth certificate. So when his birth certificate was ready and he was contacted to say his birth certificate was ready for collection, he arrived to go and get his birth certificate, and along with that birth certificate was our letter. And the actual time that passed in all of this was literally only a matter of a few weeks, so it was very short. Bearing in mind, this is pre-email, this is all snail mail, people, so it was like, what? So he gets this letter from this family that he never knew he had, and that's our story. So Uncle Robert has been in our lives ever since, and with his daughters, and it made our lives as a family so much richer, and it's been wonderful for them as well, because both Uncle Robert and his wife were both only children, so they actually have a very solid, tight nuclear family, and all of a sudden they were introduced to our more extended, insane, crazy, full-on family. And one of the things that was amazing, and it was amazing in the story that I watched today, so I'm all about, you get a bit choked up still because I was when I was watching it, is the series of emotions that you go through, and what you feel, and just this sense of astoundment. And I still remember it so vividly, meeting, because I mean I was in my early adulthood, in my 20s, when I met my cousins for the first time, and it's actually, if you've had that in your family, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's a pretty incredible, special thing. And David Lomas, he does good work. He is pretty incredible. So that's what I was doing when I should have actually have been out here clearing inquiries and prepping for the show. So I've got lots of work to do this afternoon, but I was organised about what I wanted to talk about today. Right, sorry, coffee. I'm a bit right. Okay. Yeah, Shani's just saying she watched it. Yeah, Jeanette. It was honestly, if you haven't watched it, TV, it's on 3 on demand. Yeah, I was mind blown. Anyway, I'll catch you up on the Rambler progress first, and then I'm going to launch into what I thought I'd talk about today, which wasn't what I've been watching on TV. Right. Okay. So as I have been mentioning, so I worked a little bit, and look, you ready? Do you know what this is? This is the ultimate in needle protectors. And so I kind of thought that after 3 weeks of me knitting this project and having stitches slip off everywhere, and when I mentioned it, was it yesterday, and I was putting stitches back on, I suddenly thought, I know Tommy's been watching from the old episode here and there, and Tommy will be sitting at home going, Marie, I gave you the ultimate needle protector, and you did, Tommy. You did. In fact, you've given me 2 of them, and I love you so much for it. So my friend Tommy in San Francisco has given me a couple of these. One the first time I met him, and then when I caught up with him again in February, he gave me this one. I think it's just called a needle wand. He's got a friend that makes them. I know he gets them. I think you get them on Etsy, if I am correct, Tommy. And if you're watching, do pop the link in the comments. And it is, seriously, when I saw it, when he had his, I was just like, that is just the cleverest idea. So it's essentially a little metal tube with sort of a plastic rubberized ends, as you can see, with a little hole in the top. And you think, okay, right. But this is the genius with this. One, unlike the little pointy protectors that you stick on the end, and those little thickers are always falling off. They're a pain in the arse. I also have another pair, which kind of looks like a jumper, and I've seen other ones where you actually slip them down and it kind of holds both your needles like this. But then it means your pointy bits are sticking out, and so it keeps everything on there, but it's, your needles are still prone. Now, these are Nip Pro Nickels, okay, so I don't have to panic about these breaking. But I mean, I have bent needles before. I have stabbed myself accidentally with needles before through a project bag. But how many of you out there have had that really lovely pair of beautiful laminated wooden needles, whether it be symphonies from these guys or carbon, the carbon, I can never pronounce it, the ebony wood ones, which are, not the most inexpensive needle on the planet. And you've either had another point connector or you've sat down, or the dog's jumped up on the couch and you get that snap. We've seen it, right? We've seen it in the groups. We've seen it, the heartbreak. You're in the middle of a project, that needle snaps and you can't do anything about it. This is where this is just the cat's pajamas, because you can, that's why I love it so much. So you can slip it in like that, and then it becomes very Harry Potter-esque, right? So you pop that in there, and it just keeps everything. It's nice. They're protected. There's no way on earth those needles are going to get broken. It's great. But it's and you don't just need to do a second. I mean, if you've got multiple projects in a single project bag, there's nothing stopping you sticking 2 needles in the other end either. So you can do both. The other thing you can do with this as well, which I think is really fantastic too, is that you can actually do one at either end. So if you've got like a cardigan or something like that, and you're needing to get a little bit of an extension to try something on, you can put one needle in, one end, and one needle in another end, like this. I mean, this is in the round, so it doesn't work quite so, but you're actually getting an extension. So it's actually just a really, really nifty little thing, and I love mine. And I've got a couple of particularly smaller sized needles, wooden needles, smart wooden needles. That's where the other one is actually is sitting with those, and it's just really fantastic. So I think it was called a needle wand. If you are watching Tommy, and you can pop that link in the comments, that would be fantastic. I do know it's not something that's available domestically, but if it is on Etsy, once things, you'll be able to ship them. I actually just think it's very, very cool. So to that end, I have popped that on there. So then I've done about 5 centimeters of the body, just to sort of, so this is upside down, just in case you're wondering. So 5 centimeters of the body. So then I could give myself a little bit of distance to cast on my sleeve. Now, my friend Marcella that wrote this, so the one thing I will say about this pattern is that it is relatively straightforward, but it does make a lot of assumptions about your skills, okay? So, which is part of the reason why it kind of morphed me on to what I wanted to talk about today. So there is, if you were an absolute beginner, I wouldn't recommend this, because there's a lot of gaps. So she doesn't actually, she assumes that you know how to do so many things, whereas a number of patterns today are actually, for an experienced knitter, quite overwritten. But it just means that if you're an inexperienced knitter, you can actually go through and follow every single step, which I actually think is an important thing, because it means that, you're more likely to get your project finished. So the under the instruction, so for sleeve, it literally just says choose sleeve of preference. There's long and short. I'm doing it long. And it starts straight with the decrease round. So there is no instruction here whatsoever for picking your stitches up. None. That has been left out. Whether or not that's a mistake in the tech editing, I'm not sure. It quite possibly could be. Anywho, if you are knitting this and you're wondering what's going on, you will have, and you've not done anything like this yoked knitted, you've got a number of live stitches here sitting on a holder. I've got some on my thread here. And then you have the stitches that you have cast on across the bottom of your doofa. So what I suggest you do is that you take your needle or DPNs, whatever you're choosing to do, and you pick up, just place your needles on those live stitches. And what I've gone and done is I've started, spin this around. I've worked, so for me, it was a cast on 14 underneath the underarms. So I've gone halfway along to that, to the 7 point, and there are 7 live, you'll see there's 7 rows there. So I've picked up 1 stitch in the top of every single one of those rows. Then there is sort of, as you can see, quite a little bit of a gappy bit there. So I've taken the last stitch there and I've actually jumped all the way over to that first live stitch there, because you've got this big bit in the middle, and essentially you want that to marry together. You want to get rid of that hole, because there will be a hole there otherwise. Then I've knitted all the way around the live stitches, and then I've reversed it at the other end, the last live stitch there, and then I've moved over to the first of the rows there to pull that together. So then she has what she says here is a first decrease row. Now what I have gone and done is, when I've worked back to the beginning, I've placed a marker. What I have gone and done is I have then knitted a first row, and I have actually done my first decrease row by knitting 2 together where those 2 stitches meet, right? So the last of the last of the cast on stitches and the first of the saved stitches here, and then the same over there. So I've done a knit 2 together there, and I've done an SSK there, and that has just gone and tightened that up. So if I show you on this other side, as you can see, no hole. There it is. There. Well, weeny hole. I actually impress myself sometimes. I know. So that's what I've gone and done. So that is not in that instruction, but it's quite a standard technique when you're picking stitches up around a sleeve to work in the round. So if you have not done that before, if you really get stuck, you can rewatch this back or give me a yell. Believe me, my verbal instructions are vastly more easy to understand than my written ones. So trust me, you're probably best to watch this back. So then I have just started. So while I was watching David Lomas and weeping like a baby, I was working on my sleeve. So I have got I've got a set of one set of interchangeables. Mine are Addy Turbos. I have knit pros, which I like, but I have to admit my first needle love is Addies. I do love Addies. I like, they have a very the tips and even the fixed circulars, and I've even actually got what they call the Addy straights, which are tips but with a knobble at the end, but they're very, very lightweight. So for me, I really love them. So that's just me. But as I said, I might do an episode because I am the world's greatest needle whore, and I'll show you all the needles that I've got and have collected. So that's where I'm at. So I'm working on that sleeve at the minute. So when it comes to then her instructions here, the decrease round I've ignored for the first round because I've done my decreasing to pull that gap in together. And then she has gone and done the decrease round every sixth round a certain number of times. So I will do her decrease round from the sixth time, and she's gone and done it 3 stitches either side of your beginning of the row marker. So I will do that because then that way I'll get a nice little decrease up through the center. So and if you haven't caught previous episodes and you're wondering why on earth I am doing the sleeves now instead of going down the body, a couple of reasons for this actually, and it was something Ethan and I talked about on Saturday, and it's interesting, it's something he does too, is with a top-down garment you've got the ability to actually try it on as you go. And I make, if you haven't figured it out by now, I make a lot of modifications to the patterns that I use, and that is largely due to the fact that I am not a classic perfectly sized beauty. And I want to ensure things fit. I went for years and years and years not knitting garments for myself, or if I did knit a garment for myself, I would be deeply unhappy about it. And I couldn't figure out why. And it was because I was taking a pattern and just assuming that this is how the pattern is written, so therefore must be how it must be knit. And that's horseshit. Essentially, it doesn't need to be like that. So once I got over my big bad self and realized that that wasn't the case, and actually started taking some measurements and realizing that what I thought I was and perceiving myself in terms of in a written pattern form and what I was producing were two completely different things. And I have talked about this before, but the number one mistake I made was I just naturally assumed that because I am a rather Rubenesque classic size 22, and I have been this size for the last 25 years, yo-yo, I am not. I am pretty constant. Proportions have moved slightly. It's amazing what having a couple of children will do, but pretty much my weight and size has remained relatively constant over that time. But my assumption has always been, when I've gone to knit something, that I always have to knit the largest size. That was what my assumption was. So then I would knit these garments, knit the largest size, and they just looked wrong. They really did look wrong. I didn't understand ease, negative or positive ease. I didn't understand so many different things. So then I had a bit of an epiphany about 10 years ago now, and suddenly realized what I was doing wrong. And so that meant that when I started knitting garments, that the ability to make alterations so it would fit me more readily was a very realistic and easy thing to do. And that, I needed to actually start looking at how I shaped and styled my knits more realistically, and actually realize that, God, okay, you're not that big, and I have been taking my bust measurement from the wrong place, and all of these sorts of things. If you want to sort of know so much more about that kind of stuff, that's where the wardrobe toolbox that Libby from Trudy Myrtle, she just honestly dives into all of this stuff in absolute detail. So that is certainly, I will defer definitely when it comes to knitting for fit. She is the master or the mistress. Definitely the toolbox, those who are already in there will be able to attest how good that is. So if there is a new set of membership that rolls around for that, I know it's closed now, but I think she'll possibly open that subscription back up again at some point. So if and when that does happen, you need to jump on it. It's definitely well worth it. Right, so that's where I'm at with rambling. In terms of what I busted out today, I suddenly thought, because of the theme that I was doing today, I do need to get this chair wheeled. It's creaking. I've actually busted my chika out today. I didn't realise it had come home. Half my knitted wardrobe lives at work. In fact, I even had to have a little tag explaining what the pattern was and what was required. I had to take that off before I came out here. So I busted my chika out today, which is knitted in Southlander, Southlander bulky. This is by Midori Hirose. And I have done two of these. I've done this one in the charcoal, and I have done a second one in a lovely pink, Ashford 12 ply in pink. I did one of them, and I think it was the Ashford one. One of them I did, I changed needle size. I did the neckline the same, but I actually did one of them on slightly smaller needles, and I think it might have been the Ashfords. I can't remember. I'll have to have a look back at my notes. But I love both of them, and they're just great for throwing over dresses. And also, too, her design, it's got this just very striking sort of design element with this neck. And so I just bust that out today because it's a bit chilly today in the old she shed. So what I wanted to talk about today, and it was with modifications, and I've had a couple of notes with so many people are coming back and starting to knit again for the very first time. So you haven't knit for a long time, or you're pulling together. And I've had a lot of inquiries through Facebook or through the website asking about, do you have a written pattern, or what were you wearing? Can I have, what's that pattern you made modifications? Is that written down anywhere? And all of those sorts of things. And it's because the fear, of course, is that if you're wanting to start again, that you want to make sure that you've got things right. So quite often, though, you actually have a pattern at home, or you'll dig out a leaflet, something that you have had in the back of the cupboard for a long, long time. It is actually very, very easy to make modifications to a pattern. So regardless of whether it is a pattern for a baby pattern, a child, or something for yourself, I thought I would just give you a few simple little hacks that I use to actually make the modifications that I do, because I do it all the time. I will have a pattern and I will make a modification to that pattern on a whole variety of different reasons. So I thought I'd just cover that off, because it just means that you're using the resources that you possibly already have at your disposal, and you don't actually necessarily need to go out and purchase a new pattern. But the other thing I thought I would also cover as well, if I can get the technology working, I think I might get the technology working. Let's have a quick look and see if I'll be able to do that. I don't know. This is all just a bit much for me. But one of the things that you can do is in terms of your searching, particularly on Ravelry, how you search out what it is that you're wanting to find and how to actually find that pattern that you're looking for, because that does actually make a huge difference. So when it comes to a pattern, do you need to follow the written instructions? Well, I see a pattern a little bit like a roadmap. And a roadmap will often plot a point between two destinations, but there are often alternative ways to get to that destination. And I see a knitting pattern very much like that. You don't necessarily have to take the most direct path between the 2 points to get to what you want. So this is an example that I'm going to start with, because I'm going to pull this one out because they're both the same pattern to show you. So both these beanies have been knitted using the same base pattern. This one is a DK, right? I've done this beanie is in the flat. Now I rewrote a lot of stuff on this pattern and have it at work called the bog standard basic beanie. It is a derivative of another free pattern that's available called the Kogo beanie, which I will put back in there because I think the bog standard I haven't got in digital form, so I'll give you the Kogo. Either way, mine was derivative from that. So it's a worked flat beanie, because a lot of people don't feel comfortable working in the round. If you're somebody who is comfortable working in the round, you will be able to modify this into the round really easily. So I won't need to go into that. So, God, I'm really snuffly today. So that's the base beanie. This one is worked in DK. I have also worked this with a double rib at the bottom, and as you can see, that ribbing is quite firm, and that's because the knit stitch on the knit pole there is a twisted stitch. So that means that on every single knit stitch, I have knitted into, and I've done knit stitch. Oh, I see. You know what I'm going to do? Aha. Let's just do this and see if this helps. So hopefully this is going to work. Aha! Right, that's better. I didn't realise that I had taken my laptop inside yesterday to do some work. And it was on the Wi-Fi, which is very weak from the house out in the she shed. And I do actually have a hardwired connection. So I'm now hardwired again. So hopefully that will keep us together. Right, anyway, where did I get to? So, twisted rib. So I did this twisted ribbing. So it was knit into the back of the knit stitch. Oh gosh, my camera keeps to the knit stitch on the right side. On the wrong side, coming back knit round through the back through front of the stitch coming back. So that's that modification I made there. This is exactly the same pattern. Exactly. But as you can see, 2 different yarn weights, right? So what I did with this one is done in a 12 ply, so I adjusted the needle accordingly. As you can see, I've got a 2x2 rib there, wanted a bigger ribbed portion. But basically what I've gone and done is just some very, very simple maths. I've worked out what the length it is that I needed to be. Now, to be fair, I think the Kogo and possibly, I definitely know my bog standard basic, I've actually done those maths for you of what the cast on numbers are. So then I've just done that accordingly. But but one of the things I've done is I've actually gone and made a much deeper ribbing because I wanted it to sit firmer across the forehead. And as you can see, this is striped with loads of colours, and it's because I had just had scraps. This was the very first lodge, and so there's the inside there, and I've got them woven all those colours in. I have to admit, working a beanie flat for colour work is great because it means that you can line your stripes up much more easy than doing jogless stripes, which are quite probable, but you can do jogless stripes in the round and they can look great. But it's just me. But that just shows you how one pattern can be transformed into a couple of different options. So that's that one. Another example is, and let's move that because I'm going to need that in a minute, is my Ever After cow, which I was talking about yesterday. So I haven't cast that on yet. I was talking about the beautiful, colourful yarn that I had that I bought in Tasmania. So this is I found this. I thought this may have gone missing, but I found